Hello, I'm Dylan.
And I'm Keon.
This is Triple Play, that podcast where there seems to be no sign of intelligent life anywhere. Because this month we watched Toy Story.
Written by, alright, I'm just going to read this off Wikipedia. Joss Whedon, surprisingly, Andrew Stanton, Joel Cohen, Alex Sokolow, John Lasseter, Pete Docter, I already said Andrew Stanton. Joe Ranft, Rita Sao Doug Chamberlain, Chris Webb, Ash Brannon, Michael Arndt, and Lee Unkrich. And, oh no, that's four.
That's it. Directed by John Lasseter and Lee Unkrich.
And released in 1995, 1999, and 2010.
I got the easy job this month, as I seem to always do.
There's actually even more writers if you look into the production of the scripts and stuff, because there were tons of scrapped ideas and scripts that just didn't pan out but were fully written and stuff like that, as a lot of movies have, but this franchise has had even more trouble.
Yeah, well, because Toy Story was like, it was a huge moment in animation history. First feature-length computer, when it came out, first feature-length computer animated movie.
But like before that, when they're working on scripts and stuff, I mean, I know we'll get into it, but like, there's a lot of it. I mean, it almost got canceled multiple times. One and two. Yeah.
Well, before we get there, we usually start with how many times we've watched this, and I've watched this like dozens of times. The first one, anyway, not the later ones.
Yeah, the first one, I don't know how many times I've watched it. Dozens.
Yeah, I think I actually watched the second one more than the first one, though.
Huh. Yeah, I've watched the second one a couple times.
I watched them a lot when I was a kid.
Yeah. And the third one, this is my second time watching.
Yeah, me too. It was just as good as I remember, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I mean, they weren't bad. Like, they were all pretty good, but like...
Yeah, I liked all of them.
Not my favorite, like... Not even my favorite, like... 3D animated movies.
Are they not even your favorite Pixar movies? They're not my favorite Pixar movies.
I guess not. No.
My favorite Pixar movie is WALL-E, so... Triple Play update on an old trilogy, the Alien trilogy. Apparently, this is something I just found out that I wanted to share in case anyone found our Alien episode really interesting, but I think the original draft of Alien 3, Audible...
toys in it.
Audible has turned it into like an audio drama kind of thing. So
okay, really interesting thing that you just kind of spliced in.
Yeah, just wanted to bring it up in case there's anyone out there who like really liked our Alien episode.
Okay, I wonder if they retained all the F-bombs. It would be really funny, like for the because you know how they get like people with interesting voices to read audiobooks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And do all the characters' voices and stuff. We might check that out just
to see if they did. That's it. They're the only reason you would check it out right there.
Yeah. I mean, the only Alien movies I would rewatch are Alien and Alien Resurrection, the two best Alien movies. It's true.
Screams an alien. I wouldn't watch Alien Resurrection if you paid me.
Second best Alien movie.
No. No. It's not even the second worst Alien movie. It's just the worst.
Actually, I mean, I would watch Prometheus and whatever the other one's called if I wanted to get back into the Alien franchise.
Prometheus was pretty good. And I liked Covenant, but not a lot of people did, so...
How about that third one that's never going to get made? How do you like that cliffhanger ending?
Covenant didn't actually end on that much of a cliffhanger, thankfully.
Oh, well then I've been misinformed.
Although it does end with the, wait, how does this connect to the first movie ending?
Anyway, that's neither here nor there. What is here and there is toys that can talk.
Right.
That's what this franchise should have been called. Toys that can talk.
Yeah, I don't think it would have done that well if that's what it had been called.
Man, how do we turn Toy Story into like a clickbait article? Cowboy and astronaut team up to save what are they saving? Themselves. You won't believe what happens next.
We're like toys come alive. You won't believe what happens next.
Top 10 reasons why your doctor doesn't want you to know your toys can talk.
Top 10 reasons why you think you're a toy. Top 10 reasons why you don't think you're a toy.
Anyway, the production of Toy Story 1 is like pretty intimately connected with the creation of Pixar.
Right, but
I feel like we're gonna try and separate those as much as possible just to detail the movie itself.
Even though it's not going to really be possible. But just before we get there, I want to wax lyrical on digital distribution and DVDs and the difference between the two, and how I've just discovered this week another reason why physical media is far superior to digital. So I rented to watch these. I rented the first two on Amazon, plus bonus content. And so during the week, during the 3 days that they allowed me to watch the stuff, I watched the bonus content, and I discovered that there was basically no on-screen indicator about what bonus content you were going into. Because, typically on a DVD menu, you would know what you're going to watch as you navigate through the menu. Bonus features, I don't know, animated stories. There's basically no on-screen indication of that on Amazon, and there's basically absolutely no... There's no way to know from like seeking in the time bar what you're going to jump into. There's also no way of knowing what order, as far as I can tell. Maybe there's something in the weird X-ray overlay that I didn't see. No way of telling what order all these bonus features are in, so they kind of just play back to back, and you're just like,
well, they put it on that.
What's next? I don't know.
It's a grab bag of bonus content. Well, they put it on the end of the movie too. So first you watch the movie, and then it goes right to the bonus.
Yeah, they just kind of make it a 3 to 4 hour long digital file.
But that's not necessarily something that's wrong with digital. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm going to be the first one to like bash digital distribution. But, well, maybe 2010 digital distribution is better, where they just give you like a DVD with the file on it, as we learned with Toy Story 3. But that's not necessarily something wrong with digital distribution. I mean, you could have a DVD where that's the case. They just put the movie on it and then the content.
Yes, you could, but that's not the norm.
No, it's not. And
and you could have a digital file that doesn't do that. But again, that's not the norm. I was watching the Toy Story 2 when they got near the end. I'm like, it just started playing these things. I'm like, what the hell am I even watching? It was the trailer for Toy Story 2. They just slapped that in at the end of the bonus features, and I'm like, great. Great. It was like I had like 3 minutes left before they would kick me out of it. I'm like, great, you're showing me the freaking trailer. I'm going to skip ahead.
After 3 hours of Toy Story 2 material, you know what you really should watch next?
The trailer for Toy Story 2.
Yeah, no, I mean, even physical distribution media, like DVDs and Blu-rays, kind of suck. I mean, especially VHS tapes.
Okay,
like,
well,
one
VHS.
Yeah, but I mean, one day they're going to be totally, like, non-playable, which is why books and paper are much better.
Yeah, but you can't turn a DVD into a book. I guess you could just print the binary on pages and then just input it manually later in the future.
Yeah, that's why
Go back to punch cards.
Well, that's why info recorded on paper and books and stuff is, like, much better than...
Paper can burn, though. Paper can be eaten by moths.
Still the best form of saving.
Clearly we should go back to clay tablets. Actually, the best form of saving stuff is probably those metal plates they use to print newspapers. Those will never degrade. Just make metal plates of all your information.
Paper's still the best.
Paper can be destroyed.
But also, I mean, you're also not thinking in terms of its movability, its movance. Which is a word.
Portability.
Yeah. Stealing from medievalism, medieval studies, whatever.
Sounds like you could just use the word portability.
Anyway, Toy Story.
Yeah, so Pixar. The story of Toy Story really does begin at the inceptions of the Pixar company as an animation company. Because if you didn't know, Pixar, before they actually went to make their first animated feature. They're like, "God damn, computers aren't strong enough or fast enough for us to do this right now." So
They made a couple shorts in the 80s.
yeah, they
John
made some
Lasseter
shorts.
is the like main guy behind all of this.
But before they even made those shorts, they actually made a computer. Fun fact.
Yeah.
Probably partially because Steve Jobs, when Pixar was founded, only had a 5 million stake in the company and had a position on the board. George Lucas is involved in this story too, which I didn't know at all.
Yeah, Pixar started out as a division of, it wasn't called Pixar at the time, but it started out as a division of Lucasfilm.
Right. And then it split off and it became Pixar, and Steve Jobs invested. And he invested when he got fired from Apple and he created Next. He invested I think like $50 million of his own money into Pixar, which basically gave him like almost but not quite a majority stake in the company.
I mean, he was once they actually get into the making of Toy Story as we know it, he funded some of that like out of pocket. Kind of like how the Wachowskis like pay for all their own movies now.
Yeah, well, that's their own fault.
That's what happens when you're a true visionary.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you saw my tweet this past week, but I tweeted that if your trailer has the words visionary director in it, there's like a 90% chance your movie's gonna suck. And I was prompted to tweet that by a trailer for Ang Lee's new movie that said from visionary director Ang Lee. I'm like, great. One was the last like notable Ang Lee movie, Life of Pi. That was like 2012.
Yeah. The only noteworthy thing from that movie was that the tiger like bankrupted a bunch of companies.
I don't want a bunch of Academy Awards, but Ang Lee's movie after that, Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk, that bombed.
Never heard of it.
He filmed it at 120 FPS and people saw it and they said they came out and they were sick because of it.
Anyway, I think it's pretty clear that we don't want to talk about Toy Story.
Well, I have a ton of like stuff about the actual Toy Story, the Toy Story story when we get into it. But we got to get through, Pixar's formation first. But anyway, they sold the computer to Disney, which is how they founded their working relationship with Disney.
Well, John Lasseter was actually from Disney. He worked at Disney. And actually seeing Tron, I heard, is kind of what inspired him to holy cow, this is amazing.
Yeah, that's what he said on the Toy Story 1 bonus features. He kind of talked about how he got into animation, and he talked about seeing Tron, and that's when he was like, oh yeah, computer animation is going to be this really big thing in the future, and I want to be involved in that. And that's when he went over to Pixar, and they started making the shorts, Luxo Jr., which is where the lamp gets his name from, if you didn't know the lamp's named Luxo Jr., and Tin Toy. And Tin Toy would actually serve to be the main inspiration behind Toy Story going
it's very, very different. Goes through many different drafts, so to speak. But yeah, Disney was always interested, or had been interested in a while, like at the end of the 80s, in getting like John Lasseter and Pixar back into, their own pockets or whatever.
Yeah, well, so Pixar and Disney they forged this relationship because John Lasseter ended up going over to Pixar to make animated films, and he brings over some talent from Disney, Joe Ranft being one of them. Joe Ranft apparently worked on a whole bunch of Disney animated movies, like traditional animated movies. Before this, he went to CalArts and he worked with a bunch of...
How do you like that CalArts nepotism?
Yeah,
that's a part of this.
That's something we're going to have to bring that up because it's kind of hard to avoid that. But he worked with like a couple famous animators, and then he also went over to Pixar, and that's how we kind of get the quote-unquote Pixar...
The Dream Team.
They have like a name for it.
That's so sinisterly.
They call it like the Pixar, I think the Brain Trust or something like that.
Well, that sounds actually a lot more sinister than the Dream Team.
Like John Lasseter, Andrew Stanton, Pete Docter, Lee Unkrich, Joe Ranft, and that was kind of like the core like team that was leading Pixar for its first like decade.
Brad Bird becomes a part of this after a while, or like 10 years on.
Yeah, well, basically for the first essentially decade, it's this kind of group of like 5 or 6 people who come up with all the stories, and they go up to basically a log cabin and plot out all these stories and they come back down from the log cabin, and they plotted out, I think, Toy Story, Bugs Life, Monsters Inc., and WALL-E, I think. I think the technology for WALL-E wasn't there till literally a decade later, so...
Yeah, and of course there was... I mean, this actually... The door... Like, once they got into this relationship with Disney, it was unclear what was going to happen to Pixar as its own studio, because at the end of the 80s, Disney had never put out a movie that wasn't animated by their own internal studios.
Right.
And then when Nightmare Before Christmas came out, that sort of opened the floodgates for that to happen.
Yeah.
Because that was the first Disney movie that was animated. Because what's his face? Tim Burton used to work for Disney, and then when he left, because of that, working relationship, they let him, have his own studio or whatever that they put out the movie. So after that, it became clear that Pixar would animate the movie, but Disney would also be involved.
Yeah, Disney would basically distribute. They basically had a distribution
But they also
deal
had creative control over pretty much everything. Although by 1990, like 4 or 5, they were like, hey, like, let's hands off toys.
Yeah, and then there's a reason why they did that they tell multiple times in the Toy Story 1 bonus features, but which is actually like a pretty interesting... Yeah, pretty interesting story. And then that working relationship, that distribution relationship, becomes pretty contentious around the time of Monsters Inc., I think, a little afterwards.
Oh, well.
And then that's
I
when...
didn't get that far. I didn't look into any Monsters
Oh, well, that's
Inc.
like a huge thing about the making of Toy Story 3, which I guess I'll bring up later on, is that contentious working relationship and the eventual acquisition wholesale of Pixar by Disney.
Yeah, I know we were discussing this right before recording, but I just want to mention it again that, like, I read Disney, like 60% of the movies that come out now are, like, from Disney in some way.
Yeah, well, like I said before we started recording, they own Miramax. They own Fox now. They own Marvel. So they own Star Wars.
And they own all the other stuff that they were just putting out by themselves, like,
Frozen.
for a while.
Wreck-It Ralph.
Aladdin.
Can't possibly be as bad as that Alice in Wonderland remake that Tim Burton directed a couple years ago. I didn't watch that, but I did watch the sequel that wasn't directed by Tim Burton, and you could kind of tell because it was some other random guy, just a random nobody trying to imitate Tim Burton's style.
I mean, I've seen those movies, and yeah, they're pretty bad, but I've been keeping up with the Aladdin trailers, and I don't know, like, I think it
Can't possibly be as bad as Sonic. I don't know if you saw the Sonic trailer, but that's a thing.
I don't know if I even want to. I mean,
You don't.
I've seen the design. I don't know if I want to see it in motion.
You don't. I'd rather die than watch that movie. I would rather die than watch that trailer again. Just as a preview, they use Gangster's Paradise in that trailer. A Sonic trailer. That classic Sonic.
Yeah, but that's been like a meme for the past 20 years of like, why are they including rap, like original rap songs in Sonic games? Like the first ones that came out just had like chiptune, like regular happy video game music. And then like eventually they went hardcore and started adding guns and like
I don't know.
metal.
Back to Toy Story. Eventually, yeah. Well,
executives from Disney were like, hey, we need to make this movie our own because otherwise it's never going to succeed.
Well, so again, Pixar, they didn't have the technology to make a fully animated feature-length movie yet. They were basically waiting for Moore's Law to catch up with them, which if you don't know what Moore's Law is, the like pleb noob version is basically computing speed increases every 4 or 5 years. The actual formulation is that the number of transistors you can put on a CPU doubles every 4 to 5 years, which in essence doubles the speed of processing. But they were waiting basically for the technology to become available.
Well, they were also developing their own computers as, a dedicated 3D animation studio. A lot of this stuff was, as far as I know, pretty groundbreaking. They developed techniques to drastically reduce the price of drawing animation frames and scanning them in and digitally editing them, and also doing sort of the same process with clay models, which is how they make all the... and still to this day is how they make all the characters for 3D animated movies at first.
Yeah, yeah. There's a on the Toy Story bonus features. They show a they have this clip where they demonstrate their scanning. They have a Woody head and they demonstrate how it scans it in and kind of scans in these points and then they interpolate. Actually, they do it on a Buzz head, but they have a Woody head there as well.
Yeah. And this is actually interesting because throughout the 90s and early 2000s, there are a lot of 2D animated movies and TV shows that wanted to take advantage of digital. So what they would do is they draw all the frames traditionally and scan them into the computer and digitally edit them. And that's like a very expensive and time consuming process. Consuming. So then, I mean, once I guess, like you said, technology catches up, nowadays, because of this technology developed by Pixar, it's a lot easier to do that or just go straight digital. But
yeah. Well, one of Pixar's like core founding tenets too is that the story comes first. They didn't want to make a movie that didn't have a good story, and that was something that Joe Ranft talked about on the Toy Story bonus features. He was like, here at Pixar, when we were making this first movie, this was filmed shortly after the movie came out. He was like, we didn't look at it as we were making the first computer animated movie. It was we were making a movie. That was it. We were making a movie, and it needed to have a good story, and that was what we were focusing on. And the medium we used to tell that story just happened to be computer animation.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting to me because a lot of the development of Toy Story is centered around that idea. They even said that I forget who said this, but the cinematography of the movie wasn't anything you couldn't do in a live action movie, and they did that purposely. So I think the reasoning behind it was to not disorient people or something, but like they also, backed with Disney, have some pretty famous people on this movie.
Right.
Yeah. Which to me, like, I mean, of course, I think it worked out for the best because ambition at like this early stage would have probably been the downfall of like everything.
Pixar. And if Pixar had fallen, who knows where computer animation would be
Yeah,
now.
we'll get into the impacts when we get to the release, but like, I don't know, a lot of the reasoning behind like why they try to view this as like, all right, let's make a live action movie, but it's not live action, it's 3D animated, like, sounds to me like they're, I don't know, it just sounds so like, how do I say this? That they're not like taking advantage of what they have because they have amazing things.
Possibly. And on the other hand, I guess that kind of mentality though prevents them from overextending themselves. There's the possibility that you could look at this and go, "Oh, we could do all these amazing things," and then when it doesn't work out, you're like, shoot, what are we going to do now?"
I mean, like I said, I think it's probably for the best that the ambition was kept in check. That the ambition was to create something that resembled a live action movie.
Yeah.
But like that, I mean, you can see that like in the story as well. Like, it's I mean, we talked about this when we talked about Kung Fu Panda. Is like it's not a silly like. I mean, it skews a little older than maybe you would imagine a movie called Toy Story would, if that makes sense.
No, I agree. And that's one of the things John Lasseter was talking about. He was like, when we think about this as a movie, he's like, it's a buddy cop movie. That's how we came up with this idea, is that it's a buddy cop movie, and then it's like a buddy cop movie first, movie about toys second. It's like the toys are the buddy cops, but it's a buddy cop movie.
Yeah, well, let's get into some of the Disney meddling because this is where it really comes into play.
Well, we should, before we get to that, we should start with the original idea of Toy Story, which was before Disney started to meddle. This was actually pretty interesting. Is they were looking at Tin Toy, the short
that they put out in like 87 or whatever.
Yeah, 86 I think, or 87. You've got a little tin toy and there's a big baby chasing the toy. And so the idea for Toy Story came out of that because they were like, well, what if you have an old toy that's a ventriloquist doll, was the original idea, which is wild seeing all the concept art. Like an actual ventriloquist doll, not a cowboy ventriloquist doll, ventriloquist doll, because they were thinking like, how do we make it so that this tin toy, which is already outdated by 86, and by the time they actually get to making Toy Story is like way outdated. Yeah. How do we make this the newest and greatest toy that the kid wants, and they're like, well, we'll make the other one like a wooden ventriloquist doll. And the original idea actually had the toy from Tin Toy as the Buzz Lightyear figure.
Right.
Which is interesting, but completely different from the direction they ended up going.
Well, I forget how they incorporated the cowboy motif into Woody.
It was one of the animators, and they give his name, and they actually have an interview with him on the bonus features, and I wish I had written down his name. But he basically just came in one day and he's like, why don't we just make the ventriloquist doll a cowboy? Because at that point, they had come up with the idea that the Tin Toy would be a space ranger. And they had this space ranger and this ventriloquist doll, and this animator came in and he's like, why don't we just make the doll a cowboy?
Yeah, I think the guy you're referring to is the guy who was going to co-direct Toy Story 2, but then like kind of fell off the map.
Possibly.
I think it's the same guy, but I'm not entirely sure.
And then they made a ventriloquist doll that was a cowboy. They basically just styled the ventriloquist doll as a cowboy. And everybody on the Toy Story behind the scenes talks about this as some great stroke of genius, which it is, because they're like, oh, we have this great contrast between the new frontier of space and like the old frontier of the Wild West. And it's like it kind of even more plays up the contrast between the old and the new, which is what they were going for.
Yeah, sure. In some original drafts, and Disney actually wanted to go this direction even more than I think anyone at Pixar did, Woody was sort of an oppressive overlord.
Yeah, so this is where the Disney meddling starts, and surprisingly, in the behind the scenes, I don't remember who it is, but they like specifically single out Jeffrey Katzenberg as the one who's giving them all this feedback.
Yeah, I mean, it was, from what I looked up, it was pretty much him.
And if you don't know, Katzenberg would go on to found DreamWorks, and we all know where DreamWorks ends up today. They're basically the second biggest, if not the biggest, animation studio now, next to Pixar. But
well, I mean, Disney as well. In terms of movies, it's those three.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Well, we have Illumination now, and Sony Pictures Animation, and the Warner Brothers Animation Group, I think. Every studio has its own animation offshoot now. Let's just leave it at that. But he wanted... This is something they had this round table between it's Lee Unkrich, John Lasseter, Andrew Stanton, and I'm forgetting the fourth guy. This round table, and this was recorded 10 years after Toy Story came out on the behind the scenes. But they're basically talking about the conception of Toy Story, and they talk about how Disney had like a really big hand in making the movie at that point, and they would make the story reels and they would send them off to Disney, and Disney would come back with notes, and then they described this whole process. They would take these two guys would like fly the story reels out to Disney. They would show them to Disney. They would take down the notes, fly back, show it to the Pixar executives, take down more notes. Then they would take it to the animators with all the notes.
Meanwhile, during all of this, just want to interject that Steve Jobs is still involved.
Right.
But he, at this point, basically said that he wanted to take a hands-off approach to Pixar.
Right.
Which is something that Disney eventually learned.
Just a money cow for him.
Yeah, well, I mean, that sounds like, it sounds, when he tells that story, it's like, yeah, that's what Disney should do. But then when you really like start thinking about it more, it's like, all right, Steve Jobs isn't necessarily like going to be a creative mind behind this, whether he wants to or not, you know?
Right. But they make all these changes, all the notes. They take all the notes. Jeffrey Katzenberg handed down his notes, make Woody more of an asshole.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I wasn't surprised. This is just my own comedy. I wasn't surprised by those notes from Jeffrey Katzenberg, given the way that like Shrek and Ants turned out with their completely
Ants.
I owned Ants. But they just have like very unlikable protagonists. And that was like, I guess, Jeffrey Katzenberg's his trademark at that point.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm also not surprised from like the standpoint of like, all right, this is an outside animation studio contracting with Disney.
Yeah.
This would happen. And this is somewhat, eventually they're like, all right, in order to make this movie like any good, we're going to have to give Pixar like more creative control, like a lot more.
Well, so what happens is and they detail this in detail on the special
Whoa.
features. And they actually,
Whoa.
what's interesting is they tell you that they eventually they put together this, it was like 3 to 5 minute snippet of the movie, and it's when Woody thinks about knocking Buzz out the window, and then he actually just wants him to knock him behind the cabinet, but then he accidentally knocks him out the window. And they put together the original sequence, this 3 to 5 minute sequence, and they show it to Disney executives, and it goes over very, very poorly. And basically they come out, and John Lasseter's like, someone came up to me and was like, that sucked. That was terrible. And then Andrew Stanton's like, someone like asked me, like, how did it end up so bad? And I just said, well, they were following notes. They did everything that you told them to.
Well, a big complaint from this test audience, not test audience, but like this executive audience, I guess, is that all the characters are like bickering at each other's throats and completely unlikable.
They show
kind of like
they
Blake
show
Seven
this
with toys.
They show this 3 to 5 minute segment in the bonus features on the Toy Story thing, and yeah, it's bad.
I'll see if I can find it online for
Woody
for
is
free,
like a total asshole. Like in the movie, he's like kind of a dick, but he has some redeeming features. But in this, he's like, there are no redeeming features about Woody at all. Because they also, it's like two scenes. Because they also have the scene where Buzz first arrives on the bed, and Woody's like, "All right, toys, get him off." And they're like, "No, Woody," and he's like, "What are you doing?" It really shows off the oppressive overlord of Woody. Who's like, "Well, if you don't listen to me, then Andy will never play with you again." I'm like, whoa! He's like, Slink, get him off the bed. And Slink's like, I think I'm with them, Woody. And he's like, don't make me untwist your spring, Slink. It's like, whoa.
Yeah, and I mean, and like you said, this makes it into the final movie in like a very diluted form.
Yeah, in a way that actually makes sense to the movie.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make Woody out to be this oppressive overlord.
So I read that after getting this feedback, they had an intensive like reworking of the script session.
Oh yeah, they went back to Pixar, and Disney wanted to shut the movie down at that point. Disney was not having it. They were like, nope, shut it down. And John Lasseter, because he was head of Pixar at the time, basically had begged Disney, he's like, just give us 2 weeks. Just give us 2 weeks. And he went back to Pixar and he gathered everyone together. He's like, look, we're just going to make the movie we want to make. Scrap all the notes. Scrap everything they told us. Let's just make the movie we want to make. And they did. And Disney liked it a lot. And they moved forward with it.
This is actually, I mean, now that we're describing it, this actually seems like a really big lesson to Disney, which I don't know if that's historically like actually panned out or taught them anything. Of like, you have Toy Story, you have Nightmare Before Christmas. Of like, hey, look, these movies from outside animation studios are like good for your. I mean, I know it sounds stupid because Disney's like the biggest company in the world, but like, hey, look, these are good for your company. And it's also maybe better if you're more hands off with the actual creative side of these movies.
I mean, they learned it for Pixar. They basically let Pixar do whatever the hell they wanted on Toy Story 2. They were like, he's peace.
I mean, I imagine, I don't know too much about the making of The Nightmare Before Christmas, but I imagine it was the same, because that movie's pretty dark, as most Tim Burton things are. I imagine it was mostly the same process of like, all right, you do what you want to do.
Interestingly, I think that was animated by the same studio that did James and the Giant Peach.
Okay.
Which I think is also a Disney movie.
I don't know.
I don't remember. I've only ever seen it once a long time ago. And so they basically scrap everything, they start again, and they put together a much better show reel. and Disney approved it, and they basically moved forward from there. And it was pretty much smooth sailing from then on.
Yeah, and they even, as time went on, they even cut out more of the more sinister scenes. Like, they actually created scenes with Sid torturing some of his toys. Extra scenes. He does that actually in the final movie. But
yeah, in the special features, I think it's Andrew Stanton. It might be Pete Docter. I can't keep their names straight. But he talks about, there were two main scenes that they really cut out of the movie. One of them they had no regrets about because it just didn't fit the flow of the movie, and it was like Buzz rescuing a toy, I think. And then there was another one, and they just trimmed the Sid scene down as it stands now, it kind of just hard cuts to Sid asking Woody, like, where are your rebel spies or whatever. But they show the animation that they cut out. There was about an extra minute before that where he tortures Buzz he spins him around on the end of a drill bit and then basically throws Woody across the room. And he said they cut it out originally because it was too dark, but he says that a lot of the animators looking back now kind of wish they hadn't cut it out because it fit the flow of the movie pretty well, but they don't have any regrets about doing it.
Well, this is a good time to interject that all these movies are rated G, and these are like the highest like G ratings I've ever like seen.
Yeah, they're pretty dark. They're like really dark.
There's also a lot of adult humor that I never noticed as a kid. Like
that's kind of one of the things that Pixar is known for, is that adult humor that you don't notice till you're an adult, and then you're like, wait a minute.
That was actually a directive from Disney, is like make this movie like accessible to older people.
Right. A couple of the other things that they kept in mind while working, they talk about how pretty much every Disney animated movie to this point was a musical.
Yeah, this is actually pretty interesting. They wanted Toy Story for sure to also feature musical style songs, as in like the characters break into song.
Yeah, which is why they had Randy Newman come up with these 3 songs, and they basically talk about how the songs that Randy Newman wrote serve the kind of same purpose as the songs in a musical, but they don't require the characters to break out into song.
Yeah, because John Lasseter and pretty much everyone at Pixar were completely against having the characters sing.
Yeah, for understanding reasons, I think. Understandable reason.
I guess, since they're going for a more, buddy cop-ish style movie, I can see that. Although thinking of later, this set the stage for like Pixar movies not being musical movies. Mm-hmm. But like thinking to some later Pixar movies, I'm wondering like, all right, maybe the musical style fits those movies better. And I don't know.
Possibly. I think this did start a kind of trend at Pixar of them considering music to be an important part of the movie. There are some movie makers who
you'd be surprised. Yeah, like when you hear that statement, it's like, all right, doesn't everyone? But you'd be surprised how many like don't care.
Yeah. Like I know Cars is like taboo to bring up in the Pixar world, but like the first Cars like was a John Lasseter passion project, and the music in that is like very 50s inspired road trip songs, like specifically because the movie is about that. There's like a lot of love and care and put into that.
Contributes to why it's not great.
I like Cars. Saw Cars on my 10th birthday. So, Toy Story
came out.
Well, it's interesting. There's a couple of interesting techniques I just want to go over that they used in this movie. One, they basically hand animated the whole movie before they computer animated because they had so many. Typically, you do, drawings. What's the word? The word has completely flown my mind.
What, keyframes?
Not keyframes. When you basically draw out the movie beforehand, storyboard. They had like a shit ton of storyboarding, but then on top of that, they would do color drawings, which I found out they do color drawings to send to the animation team to basically demonstrate the kind of color palette they want in each scene.
Yeah.
And then they also did lighting drawings, which demonstrate to the animation team how the lighting is supposed to look in each scene. So every scene is basically drawn 3 times before it was animated.
Yeah, and that's interesting that they kept up this like time-honored Disney process of like, all right, let's storyboard it and let's create the keyframes, and then we create the intermediate or the in-between frames. And that's like computer animation lets you not do that.
Well, storyboarding was something that, again, going back to that, we were making a movie, we weren't making an animated movie. We were making a movie. So storyboard that out.
Yeah, and I just find it interesting that like computer animation lets you not do that, but like this big, first big computer animated movie, other than I guess like Tron, which doesn't really count. I guess also because it's involved with Disney, but also not, it goes this route of like doing this traditional animation type thing. Which is also, it's not unique to Disney, I believe. I'm not 100% sure that like keyframes and in between frames is the quote unquote French classical style of animation. It's not the only style of animation. I mean, just look
Right.
at the old Warner Brothers cartoons, and that's not how they go about things.
Well, I think that's something that Pixar has kept up. Actually, is doing storyboards.
Yeah,
for
but I
all of
mean,
their
well, yeah,
movies.
like you said, live action movies have storyboards as well. So.
Right. There's a very interesting clip in the behind the scenes of Joe Ranft because he, like I said, he was at Cal Arts and he made part of their curriculum was to make like a short hand animated film by yourself, and they show a clip of it on the special features. But he like would go through the storyboards, and there's like a huge wall of them. Just he's going through the scene where the soldiers jump out and they carry the baby monitor downstairs, and it's just the whole wall is covered in storyboards just for that scene. It's kind of impressive how many storyboards they made for this movie.
Yeah, going back to the technology thing, I forget if it was for this one or if it was Toy Story 2. I think it was for this one where they developed technology that essentially put that process of drawing the keyframes and in between frames, or it essentially did that. And now that's used pretty often in both like 3D animated movies and also video games, which is why it like looks really weird. Of like, you have the quote unquote keyframes, which is the, I guess, configurations in the 3D space that you need, and then you just kind of like AI the rest into being.
Yeah, they get interpolated. Basically.
That's the word I was looking for. Which can look weird. Like, it can look weird.
Yeah, it can look weird. It can also look really good.
Like it did here.
It just depends if it's done well or not, basically.
Horrific flashbacks to Iron Man Armored Adventures.
The more keyframes you have, the less interpolation you have to do and the better it'll look. But the longer it'll take to make because you have to make all the keyframes. But yeah, so the animation process basically at Pixar was basically you generate these storyboards, you make the lighting drawings, you make the color drawings, you send them off to the animation team. They animated everyone. Then you send it off to what I discovered the like destruction team, which basically made the environment look all beat up and not pristine because this lady talked about it. She was like, it's very easy in computer animation to make things look perfect, but we didn't want them to look perfect. We wanted them to look like a real, we wanted them to look real.
Like a real world.
One of the animators was like, oh yeah, I would go home and I would get on the floor and I would like look at the crown molding in my house because that's the view that the toys would get, and we wanted that to look accurate. So I would get on the floor and I'd like be analyzing the crown molding. One of the animators, actually John Lasseter, no, not John Lasseter, one of the animators went home and used a magnifying glass to burn a hole into the head of like a baby doll to find out what it would look like. So a lot of them talked about how they were more like Sid than Andy in terms of playing with their toys.
Wow.
So there was a lot of love and care put into Toy Story. For the better, I think. It worked out really well.
Well, what's one movie where it's like there wasn't too much love or care put in this movie and it turned out like better than most other movies? I mean, I don't know the production information for like most movies, obviously, but like I can't think of one.
Neither can I. I'll think of one when we stop recording.
Yeah, exactly. Every question that we have while recording, everything we can't think of is immediately answered as soon as we stop recording.
Basically. I mean, I know you joke, but...
Yeah, no, it's true. Anyway, Toy Story came out.
It was a big success, actually. A huge success.
Far more than Pixar, Disney, or Steve Jobs really anticipated.
Or Tim Allen, or Tom Hanks.
Yeah. Oh, we didn't talk about the casting, which was that they got Tim Allen and Tom Hanks.
I didn't see much on the casting, actually.
There were a couple other... what's his name who plays Mike in Monsters, Inc.?
I don't know, but I know Joe Ranft. He was an animator at Disney and then at Pixar, but he did temp voices for a lot of the characters, and he kept his voice for, and now I'm forgetting who he played in the movie, but he was in the movie. And also John Ratzenberger, who also worked at Pixar. Because they didn't really have a big budget for this, quite a few of the characters in the first movie are just played by like animators or executives at Pixar.
Yeah, and that's something we can get into is like for this first movie, I guess just to digress a little bit, it was a team of about like 80 people.
Right.
And because of all the technology that they developed, costs were kept pretty low compared to The Lion King at the time, which was created by over 800 people and had much higher costs.
Right.
So, I mean, this really could have been, and I think was to some extent, used to like pitch the idea of like, hey, computer animation or 3D computer animation is like a good route to go because it keeps production costs low.
Right.
But then when you get into Toy Story 2, it's like, all right, they increased the team to like hundreds and it costs like a lot more. So I'm like, did they really like learn that lesson? Or it's not a route they wanted to go. They wanted to like make everything bigger and better.
Yeah. Although, again, with computer animation, the more time you put into it, the better it looks. And you can see that just between like Toy Story 2 and 3. Like Toy Story 3 looks like brilliant and Toy Story 1 is like, the animation looks really good for its time, but like compared to the stuff we get now.
I mean, that's pretty much every movie. Like the more time and money you put into it, like the better it's going to be.
Yeah.
Or look, rather, not be.
Yeah. That's not $200 million Speed Racer movie that I heard wasn't that great. I haven't watched it though. Alita Battle Angel, which was just all right, but cost like $300 million to make.
I heard people like really enjoyed that movie.
That's weird.
Like really enjoyed it.
Kind of just all right.
Guess that's what happens when you're a true visionary.
Visionary director Robert Rodriguez.
Oh, I was talking about the Wachowskis and their classic Speed Racer movie.
I haven't seen Speed Racer. Have you?
No, neither have I.
I watched some of the, I guess it would be an anime when I was younger. Anyway, Toy Story 2.
Well, yeah, I mean, is there more we need to talk about for the first one? Like, it came out and it was pretty successful. Well, created this legacy. Yeah. Created immediate, like, capitalization on it.
Yeah, John Lasseter talks about this in the Toy Story 2 behind the scenes. He's like, I didn't expect Toy Story to get as big as it was. They have this whole thing, I think it's on one of the two behind the scenes, where they get all these like big figures in Hollywood to talk about the impact of Toy Story, like George Lucas and Miyazaki. They're talking about George Lucas is like, you know, Toy Story is huge. You know, Toy Story is huge. And Miyazaki's like, oh, yeah.
Whoa, making that uncontestable statement.
I know. George Lucas here with the, like, really hard-hitting statements. Miyazaki's like, yo, John Lasseter came over to Japan one time, and I think he was like... he came over, and he was just surprised that there was this little girl who, like, ran up and, like, wanted his autograph because on her, like, Woody doll.
Yeah, Miyazaki is someone who is known for being very, not anti like computer animation, but very careful with computer animation.
But I think he recognizes the impact that Toy Story had.
Yeah,
basically completely changed the landscape of animation.
Yeah, I mean, all his movies, Spirited Away and later, use computer animation. But yeah.
Tom Hanks tells a story about how he saw someone with a Woody doll in an elevator one time. He's like, oh yeah, I'm the voice of Woody. And he like took the guy's Woody doll and he signed. He's like, oh, what's your name? And he signed it to the guy. And
Andy. He writes Andy on his...
The kid just looked at him. He's like, the kid looked at me like I just killed his cat. He didn't know that I was Woody because like to these kids, like these characters are real. They don't
it's just...
recognize that there's people behind the characters.
Right. Or if they do, it's like, do they really care? Like,
yeah. I care.
Now you care, but did you care when you were a kid?
No.
Or were you just like,
that's Woody?
It's
really
awesome.
weird watching Toy Story and then immediately seeing an interview with Tom Hanks and Tim Allen and hearing like Buzz and Woody's voices, but then seeing it come out of these like regular people. It's really, really disorienting.
Yeah, that can be like a really uncanny experience.
Yeah. Very uncanny valley going on there. Yeah, so Toy Story 2 was co-directed, actually, by John Lasseter and Lee Unkrich, I think. Because it got so big, John was like, I'll go and handle this myself.
And also, he was set to direct Bug's Life, or A Bug's Life.
Yeah. Which came out, I can never remember if it came out before or after Toy Story 2.
Well, we have the internet.
There is that blooper with the Bug's Life characters in Toy Story 2, so I'm going to assume it's before, actually.
That doesn't mean anything.
I think Bug's Life was their second
Feature
movie.
films and shorts.
Toy Story.
List of
pretty
Pixar
sure it goes
films.
Toy Story, Bug's Life, Toy Story 2.
Yep.
Yes.
Keep going. See how many you can get in a row. Just do it. It'll be fun.
Shoot. What did they make? Monsters Inc. was next.
Yep.
Then they did Finding Nemo.
Yeah.
And then they did... What did they do after Finding Nemo? Was Cars next? No. We're not at Cars yet. There was a movie before Cars that probably no one remembers, that I'm totally forgetting.
Well, people remember it.
Great. Thanks. Great.
It's all right. Here's the beginning till now. You didn't need to know this, but now you're gonna know.
So what?
Toy Story: A Bug's Life, Toy Story 2, Monsters Inc., Finding Nemo, The Incredibles,
Damn it.
Cars, Ratatouille, WALL-E, Up, Toy Story 3, Cars 2, Brave, that one everyone forgets. Monsters.
I liked Brave. Anyway,
people forget it.
It's true.
Monsters University.
I think we saw Monsters University together way back when.
Well, I can't even remember 2 days ago, so. Inside Out, The Good Dinosaur, that one people really forget.
I liked that one too.
Finding Dory, Cars 3,
That
Coco,
one people forget.
Incredibles 2.
I liked Incredibles too.
Well, officially, the official title is just Incredibles 2, not The Incredibles 2.
That's weird because it has The Incredibles 2 in the title sequence of the movie, if I remember correctly.
Well, according to Wikipedia, it's just
Well.
Incredibles 2.
Whatever.
The poster just says Incredibles 2.
Well, Toy
So
Story
that's all of
2.
them. Upcoming Toy Story 4 and Onward. I don't even know what that is.
Onward sounds pretty interesting. It's basically like urban fantasy.
It's a suburban fantasy world where humans do not exist, populated with elves, trolls, and sprites, where unicorns are as common as rodents. That sounds actually horrifying.
Anyway, back to Toy Story 2. There's a lot of really interesting, like, how they did it stuff. The Woody's Roundup scene was... One of the animators talked about how he would always get people coming up to him and was like, oh, was that live action? Did you film that in live action? He's like, no. Basically, how we did that was we just took the animated models for Woody and Stinky Pete and Jessie and Bullseye and animated them in this black and white environment. And then we added strings. We added strings to them, and that's basically what we did. And then we just added a black and white like grain over it. And that's how we made the Woody's Roundup animation.
Yeah, no motion capture as far as I know.
No, but I do think they got puppets to find out how puppets moved.
Yeah.
Kind of blew my mind when I found out Wayne Knight voiced Al.
Who's Wayne Knight?
He played Dennis Nedry in Jurassic Park.
Oh.
That blew my mind.
Whoa.
But then once I knew that and I started listening to Al talk, I was like, oh yeah, I can hear it in his voice. Now that I know who it is, I can like hear it in his voice.
Huh.
But like before, I had no idea.
I guess now that you mention it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, this movie kind of started this sort of Pixar cinematic universe thing, right? Which is because between Toy Story 1 and 2, they created a short with the guy who fixes up Woody.
Yeah.
It wasn't the exact character, but it was like a very similar
They just
guy.
basically used the model and then...
Yeah, but I forget what he was doing in the short, but it was something equally like... There's something very
similar
similar
where he plays
to...
chess with himself, I think?
I don't know. It was something...
Jerry's Game?
So yeah, something like that. It's like, it's basically the same
that's it.
character. But like, there's also, you know, the blooper thing with like A Bug's Life. I always call that movie either Bug's Life or The Bug's Life.
Me too.
But it's
That was
actually
another
A
movie
Bug's
I
Life.
watched like a ton when I was a kid.
Yeah, same here.
Those three movies, that was like my childhood. Toy Story, Bug's Life, and Toy Story 2.
Oh, Toy Story really monopolizing 60% of the movies you watched as a kid were Toy Story.
Oh no!
No, the things with like the blooper reel, and I don't know if they do this so much anymore, but it's like all these movies are somehow connected. You can imagine that Bug's Life is like, A Bug's Life is taking place like right outside.
Well,
Toy
there's that
Story
trailer,
Land.
the trailer like a house trailer, not trailer like movie
Yeah,
trailer,
okay.
that appears in both A Bug's Life and Monsters, Inc.
Yeah, and the Pizza Planet truck is in like most of the Pixar
It's
movies.
in every Pixar movie except for The Incredibles. Fun fact. Well, because Pixar started incorporating these little Easter eggs into their movies, I guess to remember where they came from. A113 appears in most of them. The text A113 appears somewhere in most of them. The Pizza Planet truck, like you mentioned. And then Pixar started with, I think, what was after Cars? Ratatouille.
Yeah.
They started adding these little Easter eggs that were like related to their next movie. So like in Up, there's a lots of hugging bear in like one of the kids' bedrooms that they fly past in Up. Like in Toy Story 3, you can see there's an Easter egg to Cars 2. You can see there's like a drawing on on Andy's wall. One of the cars basically looks exactly like Finn McMissile from Cars 2. So they started adding these little Easter eggs to their next movies. In Brave, in the old lady's hut, there's a wooden carving of Sully because Monsters University was after Brave. Kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, Toy Story 2. Toy Story 2 actually used a lot of things that they wanted to do in the first Toy Story but didn't get to. One of the things was they wanted to start Toy Story 1 with a Buzz Lightyear video game, which they used for Toy Story 2. Also, the nightmare scene in Toy Story 2 when Woody's arm gets torn, he has that nightmare that Andy throws him out. That was originally conceived for Toy Story 1 when Buzz becomes the new favorite toy and Andy has this nightmare where he's like, oh, the scene is like, oh, Buzz glows in the dark. Do you glow in the dark, Woody? Let's find out. And they turn on the lights like, wow, you don't glow in the dark, Woody. I don't want to play with you anymore. It throws him in the trash.
Well, I mean, when Toy Story 2 was originally conceived, which is right after the first one because of how successful it was unclear, actually, what this was going to be, whether it was going to be like direct-to-video, which was what Disney was getting into at the time, or was it going to be... or was it going to be... Oh, God. Don't even bring up Aladdin 2.
Oh, no.
But yeah, there was... nobody really knew what was going to happen. It was. They were like, is it going to be animated by Disney? Is it even going to be 3D CG? Is it going to be classic 2D animation? Like,
yeah, because this was part of the agreement Disney had with Pixar, was that Disney owned all of Pixar's characters.
Yeah.
Which, again, is something that's going to come up after Toy Story 2 when we get to Toy Story 3.
Yeah, they essentially, as if I understand correctly, they basically, as part of this agreement, have pretty much full creative control over Toy Story if they wanted to exercise it.
Well, so they could do whatever they wanted with it, but there was a contract stipulation that said Pixar had first right of refusal, which basically said that whatever they came up with, they were required by the contract to give Pixar the option to do it first before taking it somewhere else.
Legal stuff.
Yeah.
But eventually, I mean, they originally started this with the idea that it would be done by Pixar, I believe, but also direct-to-video.
Right. But as the project went on, I think they realized the money in making it a theatrical release.
And I believe that like they both Pixar and people from Disney were like, hey, the quality of this is like so much better than like those direct-to-video like Aladdin 2, Cinderella 2 things you've been crapping out. Like, let's release this in theaters. And as part of that, they ended up having to go back and add 12 minutes into the movie, which is a pretty difficult task when the movie's already done.
Yeah, but it's pretty seamless. Like, you can't tell watching the movie where those 12 minutes come from. So interesting special features where I didn't even realize like the lengths they went to in these movies. But in the scene where the toys are under the cones crossing the street, and I didn't even notice this when I was watching it, but they did multiple mixes of that. And originally that scene was set in like a suburb, and there's like walls on either side because it's a suburb. So it's like just houses. And he's like, it worked out pretty well when we moved Al's apartment to like right across the road from the toy barn. So we just moved the scene over there. But basically during that scene, they had a sound effects mix and then they had the music mix. And I think this was Lee Unkrich talked about how he worked closely with Van Newman because the music kind of is supposed to emphasize the magic of the toys coming alive. So in that scene, the music in the background only plays when the toys are alive and moving across the street. And when they stop, the music stops and you only hear the sound effects. And I didn't even notice that when we were watching
No,
it.
neither did I.
But they basically showed these different mixes of the scene. So they did a sound effect only version of the scene, and they show you like a music only version of the scene. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and we should mention that for the first two at least, I don't know about the third one, the sound mixing was done by Skywalker Sound.
Right, because
Going back to that,
George Lucas.
Yeah. Actually, it might have been just the first one. It was for sure the first one. I'm pretty sure it was the second one as well.
I'm not sure, honestly.
So yeah, that Toy Story 2.
Yeah, actually, not much more about Toy Story 2.
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, there was drastic increases for both the budget and the size of the team, which is related to the budget.
Right.
Which was it was just weird to me. It's like they positioned it against like The Lion King, which came out around the same time. As like, hey, look, Toy Story 1 had like a much smaller team. We can get away with smaller teams, but then they increased the size of the team by a lot.
Maybe. They still maintained that music being a large part of the movie. They got apparently mildly famous band, Western style band, to do the Woody's Roundup theme, which, by the way, there's a music video for that on the special features. Another thing that they don't tell you that it's leading into it, and it just starts. You're like, what the hell is going on here? And then they got someone to do that rendition of "You Got a Friend in Me" at the end of the movie that Wheezy sings.
Frank Sinatra style.
The one thing that they did change in Toy Story 2, which I also thought was interesting, was how Woody gets to the yard sale. Originally, what was going to happen was it was going to be this elaborate, like Buzz accidentally getting knocked out the window. It was going to be
Buzz knocks Woody out the window. Sick and tired of
No, it was going to be like Woody tries to save a toy from like falling behind the cabinet, and in the process like accidentally gets knocked by Buster out the window, and then he slides down the roof into the yard sale. And they changed it later on because they thought it was like too convoluted and coincidental, and that would have made like the new version made more sense. They didn't think it was like believable how like coincidental the whole thing was. So
yep, movie came out, huge success.
Yeah, this is where things get contentious.
Let's make 3.
Well, this is where things get contentious between Disney and Pixar. And I remember this is like really trippy because I remember reading the Toy Story 3 Wikipedia page in 2006.
Wow.
Because what had happened was because Disney owned all the characters, Pixar was like, we don't have a story for Toy Story 3. Because that was the thing, was they don't want to do a movie if they didn't have like a good
Toy
story.
3. It's just going to be Toy.
They didn't want to do a movie without a good story. So they basically were like, we're going to work on other movies, and if something comes up, then we'll do it. But Disney was like, no. Toy Story made us a lot of money. We want to make Toy Story 3. And since they owned the rights to the characters, they were allowed to do that. And Disney had just, I think, purchased a new animation studio called Circle 7.
Yeah, I actually, weirdly enough, I also remember reading about this and Circle 7 animation, like, at the time.
Yeah. So, like
how did I know? Like, I don't know. Like, whatever.
But Circle 7, Disney basically, because Pixar didn't want to make Toy Story 3, and also I think Disney wanted to make a Bug's Life 2 or Monsters Inc. 2, one of the two, I don't remember which. I think it was Monsters Inc. 2, actually. They were taking it to Circle 7, basically, then, because Pixar refused. And Disney and Pixar got into a whole legal snafu, and there was like a lot of things going on behind the scenes. Basically, the working relationship between the two studios like totally broke down like right before Cars was supposed to come out. And they eventually worked it out by having Disney just buy Pixar wholesale.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in the process, giving Pixar full creative control over their own characters and basically full independence. So Disney owned Pixar, but Pixar was at that point now independent and could do whatever they wanted with the characters. Which basically meant that the Circle 7 versions of Toy Story 3 got totally canceled. Circle 7 version of Toy Story 3 sounded like it would have sucked. I don't know how much you know about it.
Yeah, this was they I think developed a full script or close to it where Buzz gets shipped to Taiwan and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
the Buzz Lightyear toys get recalled,
Oh yeah, that's what it was.
and then Andy's mom ships Buzz to Taiwan to get fixed, but then the toys found out that like a whole bunch of toys have been shipped to Taiwan, and Buzz is probably not coming back because it's a
Right.
recall. So they ship themselves to Taiwan to go save Buzz. And Buzz finds like a whole bunch of other recalled toys when he's there, and
That part, I mean, I know Pixar completely redid the script, but the part where Buzz like befriends like these lost and abandoned toys kind of made its way into, in a weird way, into the actual Toy Story 3.
not intentionally, because apparently when they came up with the story for Toy Story 3, they went up to the log cabin. And they didn't look at the Circle 7 script at all.
Yeah, which is it's a weird coincidence that both of those things are in the movies,
Right.
or in the movie, and then also in the movie that never got made.
Yeah, and there's one or two promotional images for the Circle 7 Toy Story 3 that exist out there. Kinda,
wow.
It's kind of weird. Alternate reality Toy Story 3. And that was going to be direct-to-video, direct-to-DVD, that version. Before Pixar came in and was like, no, scrap everything. Took a wrecking ball to their plans. And apparently Toy Story 3 was like the project that everyone at Pixar wanted to work on. Like everyone who was at Pixar wanted to work on Toy Story 3. And Lasseter had to be like, we need some people on like the other movies we're making. Because when Pixar was founded, they'd do one movie at a time. But now Pixar, I think, is on pretty much on like a rolling schedule. They typically have 2 movies going at one time.
Well, even with Toy Story 2 and A Bug's Life, like
Yeah.
those were
Overlapping
like,
schedules. And apparently to convince Tom Hanks and Tim Allen to come back for their roles, they put together basically like a storyboarded version of the movie that they showed to them, and they basically just signed on like right then and there immediately. They were like, yep.
Yeah, with pre-recorded voices doing voiceovers, probably just people who worked at Pixar.
Yeah, probably. Although I know Tim Allen was willing, or at least expressed interest in coming back for the Circle 7 version, which is kind of wild.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's that wild. I think it's just like if there's something Toy Story related coming out, it's going to have me in it, as long as it has Woody in it.
I guess. There's some interesting shots of them in like the VO booth
Or
in the
Buzz,
Toy Story 2
sorry.
behind the scenes. They would film their scenes, Woody and Buzz, when they were together like at the same time, which I didn't realize. I always thought that like every voice actor recorded their own scenes in like isolation, but
No, that's not as common as you might think, especially for
Yeah.
movies. People tend to think that that's really common for some reason, but it's not.
well, every behind the scenes I had seen until this point had it that way. So that's probably why I assumed that.
Yeah, it came out, was also really successful.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's not a lot to say about Toy Story 3 because it's a pretty recent movie, and also, compared to the other two, had pretty much the smoothest production.
Well, I mean, all of these movies almost got canceled, which is like pretty crazy.
Although Toy Story 4 has had an even more bumpy road to
Yeah,
the screen.
I was going to say, for some reason, I really feel like Toy Story 4 has a more interesting production than Toy Story 3, although I didn't look up anything about Toy
Oh, it
Story
does.
4.
Like, by a lot. Like, the 2 people who wrote the movie originally, like, left, and then there was that whole thing with John Lasseter, with all the things coming out about John Lasseter, like, basically Pixar being a boys club and John Lasseter trying to keep, like, women down in his company and not promoting them, even though they were, like, qualified and, like, basically just being sexist. And so he had to leave the project because he was originally involved in it, and then the directors they brought on to replace him also had to leave. Like, Toy Story 4 has been all over the place. But Tom Hanks said it's really good, so. And Bo Peep comes back. I don't know why Bo Peep wasn't in Toy Story 3. I tried to find that out.
It's some rights thing. It's also like they couldn't get Barbie for the first one because of some rights thing. Like Mattel didn't want
Yeah.
them to use Barbie.
And then after how big
like,
Toy
yeah.
Story 1 and 2 were, they're like,
please,
here you go.
please, you Barbie and Ken all the way.
Yeah.
So that's Toy Story 1,
That's
2,
Toy
and
Story.
3.
Highly recommend actually checking out the behind the scenes on the the DVDs, although not the random like nonsense that's like, here's a trailer for Toy Story 3. Like, wow, thanks.
I wonder when they're going to drop the number, because at some point it just becomes ridiculous. Like, all right, Toy Story 8, here we are in 2050.
Well, Toy Story 3 was supposed to be the finale, which I guess is a good lead into how they work as a trilogy. Toy Story 3 was like supposed to be the end of Toy Story.
Yeah, and you can tell it's a very definitive ending, which is why as soon as we finished watching this, I was like, all right, what sort of contrivance do they create to have Toy Story 4 be possible?
Yeah, because Toy Story 3 ends with Andy giving his toys to Bonnie as kind of a passing the torch kind of thing.
Surprised you remembered her name. I guess it's not that surprising, actually. But yeah, I'd say this trilogy works really well as a trilogy.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, really well.
There's a lot of character development over the course of the trilogy as well that I think is like really well tied together between the movies and doesn't like feel janky or out of place.
Sure, yeah. I mean, you kind of get Buzz's story in the first one of him coming to terms with something, and then you get Woody's story of him coming to terms with something similar.
And then you get the toys kind of moving on from Andy in the third one. It's surprising that they work so well as a trilogy when the third one takes like a 10-year time skip. Typically, I think in the trilogies we've watched for this podcast, any trilogy that has a massive time skip like that has been less than stellar.
Well, I can't even think of any of the other ones that was the case.
We watched one, and now I'm not remembering which one it was. Because we've just watched so many trilogies, right?
Don't remember. I mean, we've watched like a lot.
Yeah.
Well,
24 of them, in fact. 24 trilogies. That's a lot of time.
Yeah. And I mean, I think in the next episode, the 0.5 for this, will go into the format changes we're thinking of for the show. But I just want to preview that here. Or podcast. I hate when people call podcasts shows. It's like, what are you showing, really? Wow. It's true.
Yeah, Toy Story 4 is interesting. It's basically a love story, apparently, between Woody and Bo Peep. I don't know if you watched the trailer.
No.
But the story is basically that Bonnie... It's interesting because Bonnie creates a toy out of like a spork. She puts like googly eyes and pipe cleaners on it for arms, right, onto a spork. And then it comes alive. And he has like an existential crisis because he's like, I'm not supposed to be alive. Yeah, I was made for eating.
This is something we were touching on in the movie of like when we were watching of like, all right, how do the mechanics of Toy Story world work? Like what qualifies as a toy? What do all the toys come into like consciousness not thinking that they're toys? Like what's going on here? Like do you have to be initiated into like realizing that you're just a toy, just a child's plaything?
Well, so Toy Story 4 actually looks like, I guess we'll see if we watch it for the show, but I mean, I'm going to definitely watch it at some point. But it looks like it's going to be, actually does look like it could also be a conclusion to the franchise because Forky comes to life in much the same way that like Sid's monster toys come to life, except he's not like a monster. He's like having an existential crisis about it, and he's Bonnie's new favorite toy, and there's this character development. You know, Woody in the first movie, Buzz is the new favorite toy, and he's like, gotta destroy Buzz, gotta get him out of here. But then in like Toy Story 4, he's like, oh, Forky's Bonnie's new favorite toy, gotta make sure Forky stays alive, kind of thing. It's interesting.
Yeah, could be sort of.
It could work.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like Toy Story 1 for a new like generation or whatever.
I'm not gonna write it off before I see it.
No, I mean, neither am I. I'm just curious to know, or I was curious to know, I guess, what direction they would take Toy Story after the pretty definitive ending of 3.
Well, all I know is Keanu Reeves is going to be it, so I'm going to be there opening day. Give me that Keanu.
Gotta support Keanu Reeves as like one of the only sane people in Hollywood.
Yeah. John Wick 3, I'll be there opening weekend. See it 3 times.
Buy 5 copies of the DVD.
I just want Hollywood to know that I love Keanu. Keanu's #1 fan, that's me. I'm out there at the movies. Keanu. Anyway, I really enjoyed watching these and watching the behind the scenes.
Yeah, I enjoyed revisiting these movies. I didn't realize how much I actually forgot.
Yeah, me too, movies. Actually. I didn't realize how big of a part these were of my childhood until I rewatched them.
Yeah, I was having some like weird like noise flashbacks of like they would play a sound and be like, wait a minute, I heard this same thing when I was 3.
I was having nostalgia for when life was simpler. When all you had to worry about was toys. I actually had a major
Watching
nostalgia.
movies about toys.
Speaking of like expanded universe stuff, I had some major nostalgia when I remembered Buzz Lightyear of Star Command, the animated TV show about Buzz Lightyear's adventures in Star Command.
Yep.
So I remember
2D animated, we should
watching
make
that
it clear.
like religiously as a kid. We owned it on DVD, and I would watch it all the time.
Yeah, I've watched a fair bit of that show.
Robot was my favorite character.
So the premise of
XR8, I think, or something like that.
yeah, I get some cool droids in there. Toy Story 2 actually uses Star Wars sound effects.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of sci-fi references in that Buzz Lightyear video game at the beginning, because also the noises he makes when he jumps across the skipping stones to get to the power source is the Close Encounters of the Third Kind theme.
Huh. Oh, yeah, now that you mention it. Wow. But yeah, the premise of this Buzz Lightyear of Star Command show is that Buzz actually is a Star Command.
Well, it's basically the in-universe. Yeah, it's the in-universe television show that the Buzz Lightyear toy is based on. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Because the title sequence is really meta because it shows the toys sitting down to watch the show.
Huh.
I went and looked up the title sequence for this episode, and yeah, it shows the toys sitting down to watch the show.
Wow.
Yep.
Other than that, there's like a ton of other expanded universe stuff. I don't even know the full extent of it.
There's a couple Toy Story shorts set after Toy Story 3 at Bonnie's house with the new toys. New toys.
I remember a computer game I used to play as a kid.
Me too.
I don't remember too much about it, but you're on a skateboard. I think you're controlling Woody, or maybe it's Buzz. And it's sort of like an obstacle course, like platforming style thing. And I remember I couldn't like get past the first level or whatever.
I remember
was,
playing
like,
a
5.
Toy Story 2 video game when I was a kid, but I don't remember much about it.
Those exist.
Yeah.
Maybe for the 0.5, I'll try and see if I still have the disc and see if it still works. And
well, I know I have Buzz
computers.
Lightyear of Star Command somewhere. It's going to be South African region DVD, but I know I got it somewhere. Well, that wraps up everything I have to say about Toy Story.
Yeah, same here.
And on that note, if you would like to email us, you can reach us at thedoctor@decorativevegetable.com. Questions, comments, concerns, inquiries, love letters, your thoughts on Toy Story before next month. Sorry this episode went out a little late. Scheduling was a thing. You can find us on YouTube at Decorative Vegetable. You can find us on Apple Podcasts and Google Play at Triple Play. Be sure to leave a rating if you like the show.
Check us out on Facebook, Trust Your Doctor. Also like us on Facebook. Also check us out on Twitter at TYD Podcast and follow us on Twitter. And next time, we're going to be watching some amount, probably a couple episodes of Buzz Lightyear of Star Command, the animated TV show. And also just to reiterate, next time we're going to be discussing some changes
Yeah, we usually
in the format
announce
of the show.
which trilogy we're watching next here, but we're not doing that this time because, like Keon just said, we're going to be changing the format up a little bit.
We're not stopping, though.
No, we're not
we've
stopping,
discussed this
so
for
don't
like
worry
5
about
minutes.
that.
Are we stopping this or not? We decided
Yeah, in the
no.
parking lot. Are we stopping Triple Play? Nah.
But until then, the end.